Does a dead clock frighten you? Let 6 a.m. transport you into a brief episode of Shiva's life as he discovers an unsettling truth. It was the coldest, gloomiest morning the month Shiva had seen yet. A roaring wind jostled the trees, making them sway from side to side. But for Shiva, all that mattered was that his bicycle was stuck. "What's wrong with this damn bicycle?" Shiva exclaimed. No matter how hard he pushed, his cycle wasn't going forward. He grunted, forcefully trying to push the pedal downwards. As he cursed and struggled, he thought he heard a faint cry from somewhere far away. He wasn't paying much attention, but to his peripheral hearing it sounded like, "Look, behind." Ignoring it, Shiva continued his struggle to move the stubborn bicycle, mustering all his strength. After a while and much effort, it happened. The cycle moved and Shiva leaned forward to check. Feeling hopeful, he pushed again with greater force when he heard an ear-splitting sound. In an instant, he realized that it was a tire screeching to a halt. Instinctively, he looked behind. A massive truck was speeding towards him. It was just inches away. Shiva froze, his eyes wide open. He tried to move but couldn't. He shut his eyes and braced for impact. Beep, 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 beep. Shiva opened his heavy eyelids and turned his head towards the source of the sound. It was the clock on his bedside table. It showed 6 a.m. Feeling strange and sluggish, he reached for the clock and turned off the alarm. The truck, he thought. That felt real. Shiva turned his head to look up at the ceiling and mulled over the dream he just had. My bicycle, he thought. He turned his attention towards the right corner of his bedroom and saw the cycle leaning against the wall as usual. The sun was pouring into the room through a window next to his study table, the faint golden rays illuminating the dust particles afloat in the air. Sitting up, Shiva rubbed his eyes. He checked his phone, noting a reminder for Monday meeting with his team. He put down the phone, got out of bed, and headed towards the window. Taking a deep breath, he stretched his hand towards the sunlight, trying to absorb its warmth. For a moment, he thought he saw his fingers shimmer. He blinked, rubbing his eyes again. Should have gotten more sleep last night, he thought groggily. An hour later, "Ma, would you like some tea?" Shiva shouted from the kitchen. There was no answer. She must be still asleep. We'll ask her later, he thought. He made himself a cup of black tea, got some biscuits, and sat at the small wooden dinner table to read the newspaper. Pollution levels increasing. Well, no surprises there, he mumbled, munching a biscuit. Good news for tigers, a steady increase in the population. Brilliant, he exclaimed. He skimmed the first page, and while turning to the next, he read, "A gruesome accident. Victim deep, beep, 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 beep." What is wrong with that damn clock? Shiva said, annoyed. He folded the paper and went to his bedroom. As he turned off the alarm and made his way back to the kitchen, he realized that something seemed wrong. He turned back to the clock. Frowning, he noticed that it still read 6 a.m. I shouldn't have bought this from that shady website. Frauds, he exclaimed with an air of irritation. "Ma, I have a big meeting today. Have to rush. I will order breakfast for you. Okay?" he shouted. Still no answer. Rather worried, Shiva went to his mother's bedroom to check on her and found her sleeping. She had her back towards him. Good thing she's getting some sleep after that terrible bout of fever, he mused as he went back to his room, ordered some food online, and headed to the bathroom for a shower. Half an hour later, Shiva slid open the door of his cupboard and found some freshly laundered shirts hanging in a row. Black, he wondered. Nah, should wear something bright for the meeting, he said to himself. Navy blue, maybe? Yeah, not too bright, and looks more professional. He put on the shirt and a pair of charcoal black formal trousers. While tying a burgundy tie around his neck, he turned towards the full-length mirror placed next to the cupboard. He frowned. When did this mirror get so cloudy? Can't see a thing. He hastily tried to wipe its surface with a towel, but it didn't help. I'll just use my car's mirror. Getting late as it is, he thought. Ma, are you awake? I am leaving. Wish me luck. Shiva shouted again while tying the laces of his shoes. He slid 2 folders inside his leather bag, placing it over his right shoulder. He took his phone from his table, his car keys, and went up to his mother's bedroom. Ma! Ma! He called twice, standing near the door. Perhaps the room was so still, so utterly silent, that Shiva thought he heard his mother sobbing, still with her back turned towards him. Thinking about Dad, maybe, he thought empathetically. I will tell her about my meeting and my chances of getting a big promotion. Yes, that will cheer her up. Walking towards his mother, he said with a smile, Ma, listen, when I come home tonight, you may be looking at the new senior manager of my company. But she didn't turn, nor respond. He put his hands over hers and bent to look at her. Her eyes were a dreary red, swollen and devoid of expression. She was sobbing silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her chest was vibrating so violently that she was having trouble breathing. Ma, what happened? What happened? Shiva cried, putting his bag down. She said nothing. Ma! Ma! He cried again. She didn't react, but the sobs seemed to grow in bitterness and sorrow. Shiva went down on his knees, now facing his mother, who was still lying on her bed. Her eyes met his, but it was as though she wasn't looking at him at all, but at something at the far end of the room with a vacant expression. He couldn't understand what was going on. His heart started beating fast with worry, his throat tightening. Why is she acting in such a way, he wondered. He ran his hand over her cheeks, warm and drenched in tears. She didn't react. Ma, are you okay? He said in a loud voice. Ma, can you? Shiva suddenly noticed that his mother was clutching a piece of paper, covering it with both her arms, a bit of its top exposed. Shiva squinted to read better. It looked like a section from a newspaper that was a week old, dated Monday, the 9th of December, 2019. The headline, in bold and large letters, read, "A gruesome accident. Victim dies on the spot." Frowning, he tried reading the next paragraph. In the early hours of Sunday, the 8th of December, 2019 at 6 a.m., Shiva Rastogi, age 32, died in a horrible accident. Witnesses say he was on his bicycle when a truck rammed into him, hurling him and his cycle to the other side of the road. Shiva succumbed to his injuries and died on the spot before medical help reached him. The police are investigating. The room seemed to shrink around Shiva. He felt as though he had suddenly been thrown into a large container of water, and the only sound he could hear was that of his heart pumping so furiously that it could burst out of his chest at any moment. Coming out of this daze, he darted towards the kitchen and looked over the half-read newspaper. The date read Monday, the 9th of December, 2019, and turned his gaze to the second page. He read the headline and the paragraph below it. It was the same news, word for word, that he had read a minute ago. Horror coiled around him like a snake. He felt as if a hammer was pounding his brain from the inside and will crack open his skull into pieces. He dashed back to his mother's room and screamed as he had never screamed before in his entire life. Ma! 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 "Ma! Ah! Ah! Ah!" He screamed and screamed and screamed till his throat grew sore, his voice gave way, and he could scream no more. But his mother never responded. She was still sobbing, her eyes blank, swollen and bloodshot, the piece of paper clutched close to her chest, like the baby she had held in her sweaty, shivering arms ever so gently, 32 years ago. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The tumultuous ticking of the Kensington oak clock filled the Virgin house, rectifying the deafening silence of the lifeless home. Each tick of the irksome clock felt like a line of thought kidnapped from my mind. The begrimed face aimed at the gray, tedious floor, shunning a reflection of my two sorrowing daughters stained by grief. My youngest daughter, Sally, rummaged through her old toys, positioning them in separate piles of cardboard boxes, her personality trapped by her mood. She was wearing bootcut, chic blue jeans twinned with a simple pearl white t-shirt, contrasting from a month ago when she skipped around in her rose dress curtained by a flamboyant jumper and a quirky jacket. My other daughter, Arabella, Bella, sat pitifully on the ground, under her eyes painted with a charcoal skin tone pairing with her bleached face. She and him were entangled together like puzzle pieces, sending the grieving girl walking round aimlessly as if she were a deserted shell. Both daughters sharing a dark spruce hair color and a round button nose just like his. Abruptly, 5 piercing strikes shot the door, relieving me off the clock's clutches as I slumped towards the feeble door. I peeled open the door, the gleaming light creeping in my eyes, and the crisp, pleasant aroma of the sliced grass inhabited my nostrils for the first time in weeks. Camouflaged in front of me was a radiant auburn head of hair stealing my eyes with its tone. With the racket of the clock slowly echoing away in my mind, I grasped my focus. Stood linear in front of me was a casually dressed man donning a pair of flawless brown Oxford shoes, complementing his umber jumper and that unforgettable auburn hair, nudging me to realize who was stood in front of me. Talbot Etain has pulled us from a depth in our lives deeper than that of the Marina Trench. He was Gabe's closest friend. A bundle of flowers was plunged forward. Talbot was presenting a housewarming gift and a bottle of fine wine. The flowers illuminating the dull house, and the type of flowers dragging me back to a memory of mine and Gabe's wedding. The same flowers sat parallel to us on our table, quilting me with joy and placing me in a safe atmosphere, like nothing could ever go wrong. As he shortly strolled off next door to me, the light in front of me dimmed by the lack of his auburn hair. That raw, pure odor of the grass gently tiptoed more up my nose, pointing me to the front garden of the house. Right of me, adjusting me to see Ramona Sharp kneeled to the emerald floor, strapped in grass-tainted overalls, reminding me of Talbot, warning me she is ruthless and sensitive to loud noise. Around the neighborhood, notorious for filing complaints. If only she sat in a room with that blaring clock. 1 foot through the decaying front door and the mood fainted, through the portal to a dimension where happiness was isolated, through to a place where reality was tough to ignore. Before I knew it, ponderous time sped up the day, nighttime coating the sky in a murky glow. Laying in a bed unbalanced by the missing weight of my husband was desolate. His presence alone calmed me to sleep. Of all nights for my bed to be cold, it is the one where he is not there to warm it for me. My mind despaired for clarity on the abrupt, wretched death of my adoring husband. I was in the dark over his murder, nobody to blame. How could I move on from something when I do not know what I am moving on from? The silence of the hollow home was fragmented by a muffled note of a snapping noise alarming me of my surroundings. The noise became more audible, louder and closer to me, like the shot of a camera, making me feel like my body was locked in a fetus position, tightening my position like a snail in its shell. Something was observing me in my helpless sleep. I was possessed with the will to stay awake, fixating on the onyx corner of the room, hiding whatever was waiting for me. Bella Gibson. I peered at the senior clock, studying its time, -1958. A month ago, Sally and I would be perched on the end of our snug beds, protected by the walls of our blushing room, wrapped in youthful decorations, sat patiently waiting for my dad to peruse us stories at 8:00 every night, without exceptions. 1959 struck the clock. 1 minute closer, and one boring pattern of words my dad muttered would send me into a stubborn slumber. Sally, however, had already managed to fall asleep on these beds of glass. The final tick, commencing 8:00, crowded the room with its twang. I wish I could hear his consoling voice again, the gentle tone of an anchor weighing my troubled mind down, and to be gifted with that ecstasy feeling like I was somebody's main priority. But his benevolent voice had diminished forever. Forthwith, to reminiscing over those times at 8:00, a voice promptly murmured into my ear. My heart galloped and my eyes widened like an owl, but for some reason I did not move, captured by this voice that infused me with adrenaline. It felt familiar. I squinted at the ash ceiling above me, striding to overcome the obstacle of my heart pounding through my chest, its rapid beating making it difficult to make out what this voice was saying. But as it drew closer, the tension was relieved, only to be sped up again by the words this voice was whispering. I rolled to my side to be gazing at the blank wall, but the voice continued. Each word, I could feel the anxiety creep up my spine like the Grim Reaper sliding his cold finger down my back. Gibber, you need to leave and take your mum and sister. It isn't safe here. By this time tomorrow you will realize you're not alone in that house, uttered the voice. My dad only called me Gibber. Opal Gibson. The sinister corner continued to stalk me in my doze, commanding the hairs on my neck to stand to attention. Its eerie shadow crept towards my bed, the vexing snapping sound getting closer, the insidious presence getting closer. Out of nowhere, a piercing shriek cried out from my daughter's bedroom. At a stroke, my frail body hurried to the room, abandoning my mind that was still imprisoned by the fear of the unknown. My gut felt like it had been jabbed, nervous and desperate. So see my daughters. I finally entered, and the bellowing stopped, putting the massive trap at complete silence once again. Bella rubbed her stressed head on my shoulders, making her tepid tears crawl down my back. Her weeping went on, but no words left her mouth except the priority of leaving that room. Still, with her head strapped to my side, we creeped over to my room, where I feared the worst. That unknown presence crawling over me. As soon as I entered the room, I was struck by a gelid breeze stiffening my body like an aged door. I could even taste the Baltic, iron taste of the air stinging my tongue with the lingering of this bitter air, like blood. We struggled into the sandpaper beds, my head and arms locked around Bella's, mellowing out my glacial body. I tried not to move my head, but I strained my eyes to see the window agape. Peculiar, I must have left it open. Before I knew it, the crust from my eyes was peeling off, forcing me to peer at the harsh daylight. I had slept for hours on end. My carcass felt at peace for the first time in weeks. I was swallowed by the sultry bed, purifying my lungs with the untainted, pure scent of the linen sheets. I tumbled to my side to plaster my arms around my daughter, only to be grabbing the musty air. The bed spat me back out, and my rigid joints splintered, delivering a cruel bolt of lightning through my ankles. With each footstep spent searching for Bella, my tender toes wedged against the vigorous floor. I got to the bottom step of the stairs, the blur of my body racing around still tinted across the lonely halls. I finally paused at the front door, that pleasant grass perfume intruding my nose once again, and similarly my attention was looted off me by a tidy head of vivid auburn hair. Sally and Bella's mouths were stripped naked, boasting their pearl white smiles the world had not viewed in weeks. Stood beyond them was Talbot, striding towards me with the two of them, all three glistening with laughter. I wanted to scold the two of them for not telling me they were on the front playing with Talbot, but this rare happiness healed my injured joints. The girls were pondering round doing nothing, so I entertained them for you. Bet that's weight of your shoulders, Talbot boasted. If sitting down making out shapes on the walls is exciting, then they were already plenty entertained, I chuckled. He giggled and gave Sally the cricket bat as I invited him in. Seeing that cricket bat opened my memories of Gabe playing with the kids, frolicking around playing cricket, but cricket never really crossed my mind. Talbot skipped through the door, closing it after him, slinging his crimson jacket on the floor, which dripped to the floor. He trotted around like he was at home, but his whole demeanor switched completely as he sat down opposite me. His posture arose like the morning sun, and his wide smile relaxed. "Is something wrong, Talbot?" I questioned. Talbot took a moment to reply, like his words were knotted around his tongue, but he untangled them and broke the white noise. "Opal, I know this seems abrupt, but playing cricket with your kids, showing how great we got along, paired with the fact we're now neighbors, has really got me thinking." He trembled and waited for a reply. Confusion strangled me, so I sat in silence as he pursued his tangled words. He gave no context on his words, he just talked about our memories together, and soon words turned to actions. As he leaned in closer to me, his subtle scent of aftershave crawled up my neck, stalked by a faint odor of whiskey. My hands acted and barged him off me, my mind still in an abyss.